This is Sunday afternoon, March 15th, 3 p.m. at the residence of Mrs. F.C. Voss, 516 North Seacrest Boulevard, Boynton Beach, Florida.
This is Lily Pierce Voss, Mrs. Frederick C. Voss, in Boynton. First, I want to state that I was the first white child born between Jupiter and first white girl born between Jupiter and Miami. I made that mistake like other people do. And when the whole country from Jupiter to Miami was nothing but a howling wilderness. My people left Chicago shortly after the Chicago fire in 1871, and they came down the Mississippi River after several other things happening to them. And then they sold their boat at Cedar Keys, sold her for a model. She was a very pretty little sloop. And they came over across the state on the mullet special, so called because so many mullet were caught on the west coast and shipped north on it. They came over to Jacksonville and stayed there for a while. And then my uncle, who was a tinsmith, got work there, and my father came with his family on down St. John's River to, what's the name of that place?
Would you wait just a minute? I want to see how loud it's playing.
Enterprise. They came on down to Enterprise, then came across by ox team across to Titusville, and camped in a tent there a while, where my little brother bought horse bananas for 5 cents apiece. It stuck him pretty hard because he's a northerner. And then they came on down the river to Ancona, which is about halfway down the river. My uncle had a piece of land there. They didn't stay there long because the mosquitoes nearly ate them up. And Captain Armour had heard of my father, and he came up the river with his sailboat and took them down to Jupiter, where my father was second assistant keeper there for a matter of a little over a year.
Which year was this?
I don't know. I think it was 1872 or 73. 1872. And I don't know why I didn't stay there. That's always puzzled me. They had pretty near everything, also plenty of sandflies. But the Lake Worth country was opening up then. The whole lake down here was called the Lake Worth country. And people who came down came back with glowing descriptions of how beautiful it was, and so they thought they'd come on down, and which they did. On one of their trips through the narrow, tortuous waterways between Jupiter and Palm Beach, I don't know whether the first or second time that they came over there, they were caught in a hurricane, and my father turned the boat over them and held it down until the hurricane blew away. And on another trip across there, an alligator crawled up to their mosquito bar they had over them, but they shooed him away.
Grandma, was there a waterway from Jupiter clear down to the lake? Or did they have to haul the boat?
There was a little train on it.
A train?
Not-
A haulover?
Not a train, but a flat car.
Well, who had built the...
I don't know. Never did know. Possibly the soldiers when they was through here. I don't know who it was. And they came on down. Well, the lake was 22.5 miles long. So there was 45 miles of shoreline. Just think of it, 45 miles of lake shore without a habitation on it except one log house up near where the first Bethesda church was built. Belonged to an old beachcomber who called himself Charles Moore. His name was Warner. But it had been built by a deserter from the army. He and his wife, his name was Lang, had cut those logs on the west side of the lake and rafted them across after some fashion, and got them across over there and built a house of it. Well, when Lang found out the war was over, which was about a year afterwards, he got out of there. And we would have had the house, only Charlie Moore got there ahead of us.
Was it a one or a two-story house?
I don't know. I just don't.
Do you ever remember seeing the house yourself?
Oh, I saw it, but it didn't impress itself on me.
You don't recall whether it was one or two stories?
No, I don't. Don't make any difference either.
All right.
Then my father came on down to the south end of the lake. And Hypoluxo Island was very beautiful at that time. It had a growth of dog fennel, which is feathery, fine, lacy-like stuff. Grows about 4 feet high all over the lower land. And morning glories all over that. And my mother said it was very beautiful, so he homesteaded the south end of the Hypoluxo Island. And my uncle homesteaded the north half of it. And that is where I grew up until I was married, until I was, well, I wasn't quite 18 when I was married. And what else do you want to know?
I want to know about where you were born and about...
Oh, yes. In 1875 and 6, there was 5 houses of refuge built along the Florida coast. Beginning with one at Canaveral, and that was kept by Captain Cook. I've heard him tell about a hurricane that they had, and that he saw afterwards a man walking out in the scrub some distance behind the station. He went out there and found a man without a stitch of clothes on him. He was the only survivor of that wreck. So he provided him with clothes and food and one thing and another, sent him on his way rejoicing. And the next one was at what they call Stewart now. It was Waveland then. And the next one was built at what is now Delray Beach. And the supervisor of construction was a Mr. Travis from the state of Maine, which my father had greatly enjoyed meeting him. And my father was told that he could be the next keeper, the first keeper. So we moved in May, and I was born there in August 1876. I lived there until I was about 3 months old, maybe a little older than that. But anyhow, when I was 3 months old, my father brought my mother up to what is now Palm Beach. The David Browns had moved in by that time. They were also Chicago people. And he went on a trip up Indian River after a side of bacon and grits and flour and sugar and beans, usual stuff. And when he got back, the night he got back, he says, "You better haul your boats out." He says, "There's going to be a hurricane." So they all hauled their boats out, and that night it blew a terrific hurricane. My brother said that he could hear the trees falling down all around the house all night. And I expect that probably was about as lively a hurricane as we've had. It didn't hurt the house, except it blew most of the roof off it, so the people got pretty wet.
What kind of roof was it?
Palmetto roof.
How'd they make them?
How'd they make a palmetto roof? Oh, that was easy. You had to know how, though. To make a palmetto roof, you go out and cut the leaves off of palmetto trees that are not more than 12-15 feet high. And then you pile them row on row on the ground and put a weight on them to wilt them down for a day or two. And then you cut the stalk end of it off to about a foot in length and lay it up just like you would shingles, beginning at the bottom, laying it up on batten strips across the roof. Of course, you have to put a cap on the top part of the roof. 2 boards nailed together to fit over the top of the roof. And that's all there is to it, but it isn't everybody that can put on a good palmetto roof. My father was in demand for that. Every time Mr. Bradley wanted a palmetto roof, he got my father to come and help him. And so, where was I?
Describing the hurricane in Palm Beach.
Oh, yes. So the next morning they went over to the ocean, but there wasn't any wrecks on the beach. And I guess my folks went back down to the station as soon as it was quiet and stayed there for a while. And while my folks were living there, my father had come up the island one day. My brother, who was 12 years older than I, Charlie Pierce, and my mother and I, being a baby, was there alone, and in walks a big Indian. Had a big knife in his hand, and my mother was wearing a very pretty bright red flannel jacket she'd made out of some of that wrecked stuff off the Victor wreck, probably. He laid his knife on her arm. He says, "Got any more like 'em?" She said, "No." So he didn't bother any more. He went off, and my brother, though, was afraid that Indian was going to give trouble. So he was edging into the dining room to get where the shotgun was. He was going to shoot that Indian, but he didn't get the chance. And the Indian went off, and Charlie went up on the roof and watched him go way off through the underbrush and through the scrub till he was sure he was gone. But it frightened my mother pretty considerably. Well, then we went back to the island, to Hypoluxo Island. Not too long after that. And that was a delightful place for a youngster to grow up. The water right down by the back door. We're just a little bit of a way from the lake on the back side, and a lagoon there where I could go in bathing and wading. And my cousin in Chicago sent me a lovely pair of Morocco shoes, red Morocco shoes. First shoes I had ever seen. Mama put them on my feet, and I went right down and waded in the lake with them on to see if they'd wade. They did.
When did you go to Biscayne Bay?
When I was about 6 years old, we went down to Biscayne Bay. My father got a chance to take the station down there for a while, and it seemed like a good thing to do. Money was awful scarce. The only way we had any money was the men would go to the beach and hunt up a piece of wreck and rip the copper sheathing off it and sell that.
Where did they sell it? Up the coast?
Titusville. They took it clear to Titusville, 160 miles.
They had to go the whole way by boat?
The whole way by boat. My father had a little 12-foot boat called the Dolly Varden. That was some trip. And by that time by that 2 or 3 weeks, by that time they were going outside from the inlet and around into Jupiter Inlet. They didn't bother to haul over anymore. Too much of a hard trip.
Well, did they have the inlet at Palm Beach at that time?
They had an inlet of sorts. Little narrow trickle part of the time. Sometimes it'd wash out big in the fall. And my mother said she'd seen mullet in that inlet so thick you could walk on 'em. Used to be a delightful place up around the inlet. You could go up there and spear sheephead around the old snags, and you get conchs, and clams, and fish and things. It was a good place to go to.
How did the inlet get there?
How did the inlet get there?
Yes, was it natural or did somebody dig it out?
I guess it was natural, probably a washout after some. I'll tell you, George Sayers, his father lived down on Biscayne Bay, had been up the Indian River, and he was making a trip down in a sailboat. And as he passed by there, he noticed some freshwater plants washing out in the ocean, and he figured there must be an inlet somewhere. So he went in and examined the coast and found the inlet, which was a little thing. Oh, they dug it out. The men dug it out several times. It used to close up. It was just an overflow, when it be heavy fall rain and a lot of water in the lake to wash out naturally. So that was the way of it. And we stayed down in Miami about a year and a half. My mother was sick every bit of the time we were there, and I think that's why we came home so soon. We only got $400 a year. You figure that out.
Did
Tomatoes 60 cents a can. We got our butter in cans, sealed up in cans. It said on it, Montequilla de Goshen. I don't know what that meant. I guess it is butter from New York. It was put up for the Cuban trade. And we had fresh meat. My uncle killed 7 deer in 1 week when we lived there at Hypoluxo. Said he thought that was enough. Well, we strung it up and dried it under the porch. Had smoked it and dried it, and it was very, very good to eat. I used to think I was in seventh heaven when I had a piece of that and a good storybook.
Did you, mother teach you to read, or did you go to school?
I am astonished that you don't know anymore. I never had any schooling. My mother taught me to read. My father got me a writing book. And I guess I spent a good many hours practicing writing.
Did you ever go to the early school up in Palm Beach?
Then they started a school later on, about 1888, 89, up in Palm Beach. And George Lanehart and Ross Brown built the schoolhouse. And I believe there was preaching in it once. I think Mr. Mulford preached in it once. And Miss Hattie Gale was chosen as school teacher. Now at that time, the school district was from up in what is now Martin County, clear down to Elliott's Key. And the first supervisor, school supervisor, was Reverend Elbridge Gale, who was also a professor from Manhattan College in Manhattan, Kansas. And it was his daughter who was the first teacher. Well, he couldn't make that trip. He wasn't any boatman, didn't have any boat or anything anyway. He was an old man. So in some way it was turned over to E.R. Bradley. I suppose he was elected, maybe, I don't know. So that E.R. Bradley was really what you might term a first real acting school supervisor in this part of the country. Then they started a little school down at Lantana with Amy Mann for teacher. Much could be said. Her father was editor of a paper in Daytona, and I went to that 20 days until I discovered that I thought I knew more than she did, so I wouldn't go anymore. So I got my education out of books, what I've got. But I have not any aptitude whatsoever for figures. It didn't seem to be possible to drive it into my head. It isn't there yet, never will be. Now as for that, I was going to tell you something else. We used to have a lovely time here on the lake every Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, and everything else. We had a picnic. We'd all get together and have a big dinner such as we had. Sometimes we had rifle matches, and the boys would choose their captain, and the captains choose their men, and they'd go out and hunt to get deer or venison or whatsoever for our big dinner. The losing side had to pay for it, which always seemed kind of tough. And we had rifle matches, and there's some good shooting done in those days. I laid down one time on the ground, aimed the gun over my toes like the men did, and aimed the rifle at the target, which was 200 yards away, and it was the smallest thing I ever looked at. I didn't hit it. Ordinarily, I was a pretty good shot. And I could sail a boat and all those things. Made lots of trips up Indian River. So, not long ago, there was an article in the paper by Mr. Jeffrey Burt about the first 4th of July celebration up at Juneau. Now, I was at that 4th of July celebration. I was wearing a white dress and a big pink sash, entirely unsuitable for such a place. And the Hope Sound and Jupiter people came over there in the little old celestial passenger coach, one coach. And we had our 4th of July dinner right inside of that coach. That's where we ate it. I remember sitting there and wishing we had a tree to get under. But the Mr. Birch's story of it ends up with a big dinner on board of one of the steamboats that was laid up at Jupiter Dock, with Captain Fitzgerald in charge. That might all be true. I'd hate to dispute him, but I wasn't there. I don't know.
Grandma, could you tell about some of the early elections here?
Well, we had an election one time. The first election that was held on Lake Worth was held at my father's house in Hypoluxo. It was the year of the Hayes-Tilden election. And there was only 3 or 4 votes cast. And my father's hat was the ballot box. His palmetto hat was the ballot box. And after everybody around there, 3 or 4 had come in and voted, they went and looked up the lake, and there was no sail in sight. So the ballot box was closed, and my uncle started from Miami with the votes in an envelope. He had a little boat that he took down to the foot of the lake and hauled her over. It's the same little old Dolly Varden. And then he made down the coast with it, and he got down as far as Boca Raton the first night. And he hauled it up on the shore, made his camp, and slept in the sand, which was a very good place to sleep. You could hollow out a place. Not much harder than many of these beds. And in the morning he was pounding his coffee in a canvas sack with a hatchet, I guess it was, he had, when a man came down on the beach. Said he'd heard that noise and came over to see what it was. Well, as a matter of fact, we all had coffee meals, but we couldn't spare ours, so Uncle Will had to fix his coffee that way. And this man said he kept hogs over in back of Boca Raton. So they talked a while, and Uncle Will made his breakfast and went on down to Miami. So that was the way that thing went on. And then, at that time, the mail went by schooner from Miami to Key West, and by schooner, I think still, by schooner to Tampa. There was later a steamer Olivet that ran. I don't think she'd gone on yet. And about two weeks went by and nobody knew who was elected. And one of the big New York papers came out with big black headlines saying that they hadn't heard from Dade County yet. And where in hell is Dade County? I guess they know now.
Do you remember any of the other early elections?
No. I only remember that because I've heard about it so much.
What about the changing of the courthouse to Juneau Beach?
I wouldn't dare tell that because I just haven't got it down pat enough. You're right. Aunt Ethel has the manuscript, which I might have looked over. But it was changed, and I know when the courthouse was changed from Miami to Juneau. So the Lake Worth fellas went down and moved the necessary books and things got pretty angry down there. So they sat around some liquor to drink, I heard. And somebody was armed, and so they sat around and didn't do anything till about night. The men decided they'd all go home. And Mr. A.F. Quimby, who was later our clerk of the court, said he knew how to get up inside. So they got a canoe, and he knew a waterway to get up from Biscayne Bay up to Fort Lauderdale inside. So they hurriedly got those books and things and packed them in the canoe, and they lit out. I think it's rather wonderful Mr. Quimby knew that, because, oh, he was a patient old fellow. Perfect blonde, yellow hair, all crippled up with rheumatism. And they got up there, and then Fred Morse's boat, the Amy, came out of the inlet and went on up there and took them aboard there at Fort Lauderdale and brought them on up into Palm Beach and over to Juneau. The Miami people are awful mad about it. Naturally, we stole them away.
Do you remember when they first started having stages running between West Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale and Miami?
Between Lantana. Stage ran from Lantana
To
to Lemon City.
About when was that?
Oh, I don't know. About, let's see, 1892, I guess, 93, somewhere along there. Let's see, the railroad came through here about 93. And I guess about 1892. They kept the mules at Lantana.
In other words, the stage was only a year or two before the railroad.
That's all.
Oh, they got the canal through, but the intercoastal canal through before that?
No, it was afterwards. They were still digging it when I was married.
Do you recall anything about any shots being fired around Hypoluxo during the Spanish-American War?
I'm glad you put me in mind of that. My father died on the 2nd day of August, 1898, and I was alone in our house on the island with my little girl, young Mr. Oyer's mother. She was 2 years old then. And I was standing there on the porch, and all of a sudden the most terrific roar and screech in the air. The whole air was filled with a tremendous roar. And there was 3 or 4 shots fired from a passing vessel. And they passed over our house, and one of them struck in the ground just to the north of the porter's house. But Henry didn't know much about it, and he lost it. Well, anyhow, we found out afterwards it was a tug Three Friends. The Spanish-American War was over at that time, but she was going down the coast and doing target practice on an old wreck that lay on the beach, the old Kim Sun. She wanted a 12-pounder forward, and that's what she was using. And John Dunn and John Hamilton and Napoleon Broward were on board. Napoleon Broward, who was afterwards governor of the state. But he was a grand filibuster. Grand filibuster. So, what else you want to know? No, I believe you want to know about Sam Lewis. Well, I don't know anything about Sam Lewis, except that I've seen him, and he used to keep a butcher shop in West Palm Beach, and he had a reputation of having killed 2 or 3 men in Texas before he came over here. Well, he killed our deputy sheriff and 2 or 3 other men, including Rhett McGregor, at Lemon City. And then when they got him up here in the courthouse, they finished him off. But I was in the state of Maine spending the summer up there, so I don't know anything about it, and if I did know, I wouldn't tell. When I was 12 years old, the Lymans moved in here from Jacksonville. And they were a very great thing to have in the neighborhood. They were a nice family, and we enjoyed them. And they had a good store and ran a schooner to Jacksonville. You see, the Brailsfords used to own the Bessie B, and they sold it to Lyman, to M.B. Lyman. And they ran it to Jacksonville, and George Lyman was very much in love with a certain girl who lived in Palm Beach. So this last trip that he made down with the Bessie B, he was very anxious to see Belle. And he got down in the pretty nice calm weather, and he anchored the Bessie off, and they swam ashore, or came ashore in a small boat. I guess they swam ashore. Came on down to the hotel and had a nice evening, and when he got back, the Bessie was on the beach, wrecked. Well, it just about finished George. George was a nice boy. But anyhow, that was the way it happened. That was the end of the Bessie B. Oh. Long about the time that I was 11 years old was the time when we had our terrible tragedy of the barefoot mailman. He had a nice little blue skiff, and I wanted to use it that week, so I took him down to the beach. And he went on down to the House of Refuge, where he stayed all that night. And then the keeper there told him, he says, a man walked down the beach a day or two ago. He said, do you think he's bothered your mailboat? Hamilton said, no, he didn't think so. But it kept preying on his mind, and when he got down to Hillsborough Inlet, his boat was gone. And it was over on the other side. They could see it laying over there on the other side. That man had taken that boat, which was against the... That was government property. It was against the rules to take it. So he hadn't been here only about a year, and he didn't know, like somebody who'd been here longer might have known. So he took off his clothes, and he hung his clothes in the mailbag on the limb of a tree and started to swim across to get his boat. No one knows what became of Hamilton. He was never seen afterwards. But there were 3 different mail carriers gave me their opinion on it. My brother, Charlie Pierce, and Andrew Garnett were Hamilton's bondsmen, and they took over and carried out the rest of his 2 years. Andrew Garnett said he was sure it was sharks because one had grabbed an oar and bit it when he was rowing across or paddling across the inlet. My brother said he knew it was alligators because when he went down to look for Hamilton, the whole shore was matted up with alligator tracks. And Henry John Burkhart, who carried it the next 2 years, and he was the fastest walker that ever walked on this beach, said he knew it was barracudas. He'd seen them laying just packed in the bottom there. Great big ugly barracudas. They're just like tigers, you know. So, if I could think real fast, I could say something else. The Bradley family, I spoke of Mr. Bradley as being the first school supervisor, lived about a mile from us. They had 2 sons, Louis and Guy. Mr. Bradley and Louis were the first of the barefoot mail carriers. Louis was then 18, and in some book that was written, the author speaks of meeting him down at Hillsborough River, and speaking of what a self-reliant boy he was at that age, whereas city boys are entirely different. Well, anyhow, later on they moved down to Cape Sable, and it was down there where Guy Bradley was in the employ of the Audubon Society and was shot by Captain Smith. His brother-in-law told me that there was no cartridges missing out of his revolver and that he was shot in the back. He was just like a brother to me, and he was shot in 1905. And they had a whole page in the Ladies' Home Journal devoted to it. And the Audubon Society did well by his family. It gave them a house to live in and a pension, one thing or another. And one of the boys really amounted to something. He's a pretty good sort of boy. The other one wasn't too good. I like it runs in all families, you know. Smith was their next door neighbor, and Mrs. Bradley had attended Mrs. Smith several times when she had babies. And the story goes that Captain Smith told when he went down to Key West and gave himself up was that the guy said, "I want your son John," and fired, and said Guy fired a shot into his mast. He showed the place where the bullet had hit the mast. We always thought he fired it himself. Anyhow, the neighbors there at Cape Sable where they were living burned up Smith's house while he was gone, and he didn't come back anymore. Moved up to Pompano. Lived there quite a number of years, I understand. You might be interested in the way we used to spend our evenings during the summertime on Hypoluxo Island. There was a few million mosquitoes to the square inch. We stuffed up our keyholes in every crack. We went around before dark and killed these mosquitoes off the windows, and then we didn't light any lamps. But my brother had a violin, and he'd sit there and play, and my mother and father and I would sing. So we spent many and many an evening singing old songs.
What kind of songs did you sing?
Oh, I don't know what kind of songs we sung. Just songs.
Could you tell about the planting of the coconut trees along here by the field?
Well, when I was a little girl, when I was 7 years old, down in Miami, E.T. Field from Red Bank, New Jersey, came down. He was a promoter. He came down with a load of everything necessary to build a big camp. I remember the name of the cook, by the way. His name was Butterworth. I thought it was a funny name. They brought a pair of mules and wagons and corn on the cob, ears of corn. That's the way they fed it to the mules. And they sent a schooner, the Ada Doan, down to Trinidad after loads of coconuts. Well, Mr. Field and I got to be pretty good friends. He had a couple of little girls at home, and I guess he was lonely, and he liked to have me tag along with him. He was a tall fellow, looked like Uncle Sam. Half-closed eyes, and sandy chin whisker. And I went out to the Ada Doan with him in a whaleboat one day. My folks let me do most anything. Isn't that the truth? And the deck was covered with coconuts, just a solid mass of coconuts. The captain of the Ada Doan made me think of my Uncle Will, and he promised me the next trip he made he'd bring me a monkey. And I was delighted, but my father wouldn't let me have the monkey. So, but anyhow, Mr. Fields planted coconuts all up and down, clear from way down Key Biscayne, I think, clear way on up as far as Del Rey. And one year we went to Titusville and brought down a couple of men to work for him, Paul and Frank Schroeder. We met them in Titusville, and they came down the river on our boat with us. Seemed to be very nice young men. And in working back of Del Rey, Frank ran a cactus thorn in his foot. And there's no doctors anywhere around. They didn't get it out, and he took blood poison working in that muddy water. And they passed up the lake, and I was down on the dock, and he waved to me. And they went on to Jacksonville and went up by ship, Clyde Line. Died before he got into New York Harbor. But Paul, his brother, lived down in Coconut Grove for a good many years. Well, there's one thing I want to tell, too, about when Mr. Flagler first came. This will be the last of it. When Mr. Flagler first came down to Palm Beach, he came down to Cap Demick's hotel, and they had engaged a boat to take him around to the different places on the lake that he might want to look at. And my brother, having the finest sailboat on the lake, the sloop Oriole, well furnished, got the charter. Well, Mr. Flagler came down, and I was amused here not long ago. Someone in talking or making a speech said that Mr. Fremd rode him across from West Palm Beach, but there wasn't any West Palm Beach when he came here first. When he got down and saw Palm Beach, he didn't go anywhere else. He never set his foot in our boat at all. He bought land right there and then. Bought it from Albert Gear. And my uncle, Robert Moore, owned 5 acres with his Delmore Cottage on it, just to the north of there, and for a long time they had quite a nice clientele. They overflowed from the Ponciana, but finally the Ponciana people bought my Uncle Robert's property and built the north wing of the Ponciana on it. So, hype is goodbye. Just having thought of something else. Now, David Brown, who lived up above my Uncle Robert's, also kept a little hotel, small rooming house. He used to come down every day when the boat came in, and he'd say, "Now if you have some real nice people, we'd like to have them." So maybe they got the real nice people. And I want to say, too, that among the early people were the McKennas. I don't want to leave out the McKennas because I do think a great deal of them. And we did for many, many years, and still do, as many as there is left here. I guess Eddie McKenna's the last one. But he's a fine fellow. Well, anyhow, David Brown raised some of the first vegetables that was raised. What was I going to tell? Oh, yes. And this son, R.K., Roswell Keeler Brown, who assisted in building the first schoolhouse here, the Brown family and Roz moved out to Seattle, Washington. Why, I don't know, but they liked it out there. They liked the climate. And Roz rose up to be the head man in the United States Custom House there. And he was back here several times on inspection tours. And finally, after he retired from the Customs House, he drove out here and visited my brother one winter. And they went over that book that my brother wrote, in which he hasn't yet published. They went over it page by page every evening till they finished it up, and then Roz went home again. It was a long drive. But we surely enjoyed him while he was here. Captain Hendrickson, in spite of my having said goodbye once or twice before, I have to go on, but Captain Hendrickson had 2 steamers. He had the Gladys and the steamer Lake Worth. Well, the Lake Worth was the first steamer on Lake Worth. She was built in Jacksonville by M.B. Lyman, who lived there at that time. And she was later hauled out and sponsons put on her sides to have more deck room. So she was quite a nice little steamer, and Fred Voss was the engineer on her. That's where I first met him. And he used to go north every summer and come back every winter. I don't know why he came back, but he did. When I first saw him, he was taking a coconut off our place. I said, "You put that down." I said, "We get 25 cents apiece for those coconuts." He threw it down, went on. I couldn't tell you anything more about the rest of it, but he was with Captain Henderson for several years. Captain Henderson also had the schooner Emily B, three-master, and the schooner Mary B, and some little catboats, the Arthur B and the Birdie B. And used them. Whoever wanted a boat used it. Well, the schooner Mary B ran to Jacksonville, and the Emily B ran to Jacksonville, but the Emily B was lost on Mosquito Inlet Bar. I don't know the circumstances. For his store, yes, for his store. Brought supplies for his store. Well, I think Brunswick's might have gone out of business about the time Lyman took over. I'm not sure about that. Yes, he had a store over on this side of the lake, made a fine failure of it. Yeah. Yes, my father set him up for a store here in Boynton, and he operated a store here for quite a while. But I don't think either one of them were born storekeepers. They were designed for something else.
Well, how did Boynton and Delray get started?
How did Boynton and Delray get started? Well, there were some people staying at Cap Dimmick's Hotel. And after we were married, the first winter we were married, Fred came home one night and he said he had to take a party down the lake tomorrow, which had been Sunday, and I could go along. And it was Colonel Linton and Major Boynton. Major Boynton was a rough army man, but Colonel Linton was more refined and more a likable type of man. And we took him down and got down to Lantan at noontime and stopped there and had dinner at Bassett's Hotel. And then we went on down and they looked over the land. And we took them back in that night. And I don't know who they bought the land from. I suppose the Model Land Company. Maybe Fred Dewey, I don't know. And then Boynton began to fill up with people from Michigan. It's a good place to come from. It filled up almost entirely with Michigan people. Just a lot of them here. H.B. Murray was one of the first, yes. And the Benson brothers. And Mr. and Mrs. What was the name? It wasn't Clapp. I didn't know too many of the people here. You see, I had a little baby at that time, and I didn't get around and get acquainted very much. But they used to come up to Hypoluxo, row up there for the mail before they got a post office here in Boynton. No. There was no sand trail along there. You might say there was a footpath. But all of our going was by boat everywhere. Everybody had a boat. Some two, some three. No horses.
Let's hear about the Mississippi, for example.
No, I haven't finished talking about Chicago yet.
All right.
The Chicago fire is what I'm talking about in 1871. And it would have burned out my people except that the wind changed when it got within 2 blocks of their house. Wind changed and the fire went the other way. Well, they had a boat ready to go to Florida. They were getting ready to make the trip. They had a little cutter, 28-foot sloop. And she was hauled out against the waterworks barn, right alongside of it. And the waterworks barn was burned.
Waterworks barn?
It was burned, and the sails and everything were in it. But the boat wasn't harmed. One coal fell on and burned through, the deck, made a little hole, and that was all it was. So then they had to get ready to get out of there before she froze over. And they had to get down into the Illinois River, and then into the Mississippi. So they came down the Mississippi until they got to where they were finding ducks frozen in the ice. Just go out and pick them up, chop them out, have duck meat.
Good.
So then they hauled into a little spring bayou. Well, there was a Mr. and Mrs. Price who had a flatboat, trade boat, and a stove on board of it. And they stayed there all winter. In the spring, they started out on the spring freshet down the Mississippi River, and they went. In the meantime, they had made the sails, laid out the sails on the bank, you know, the canvases, and sewed them up.
Where did they do that?
I don't know, somewhere early part of the trip. And they sewed them on Mama's sewing machine. She had number 8 stove on board that boat, and her sewing machine. And they went down the river. They made 60 miles one day without any sails on her.
What size boat was it?
I think she was 28 feet long. She was a cutter, known as a cutter, and had been used in the survey on the Lake Michigan for a number of years. Been laid up through the years. When they got her, she needed a lot of paint and caulking, you know. My father did that. And going down the Mississippi River, they came to a point.
Now, who was on the boat, Ms. Voss?
My father and mother, Mr. and Mrs. H.D. Pierce, and Mrs. Pierce's brother, Will Moore, Captain Will Moore.
I see.
He was well known here.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother, who was about 10 years old, Charlie Pierce.
Yes.
The one who wrote that book that you can't find somebody to get it published.
That's right.
And so they said, well, shall we take this cutoff? There was a cutoff across the point, and there was a canal, waterway through this point. And just the instant they said, we'll take the cutoff. And they started going through the cutoff, and there was trees falling. The current was carrying away the trees from the roots, you know. They were falling on each side. And my father said, well, this would be some place to meet the Robert E. Lee. And here she comes. She was coming up the other way. The Robert E. Lee, quite a big steamboat at that time on the river. And
Was this 1872?
71.
71.
They didn't have much room, but they managed to get by. And as they passed by, that's what they call a waiter. Those trees, you know, falling with the tide and coming up with it. But this boat was a ferry bell, and she just came to the tree at the right time, slid over it, went on. If it hadn't been for that, they'd all been killed.
No, I declare. What was the main reason for coming down? Just they wanted a warmer climate?
My mother's people had all died of TB. And they wanted to get my mother out of there because she wasn't in very good health, and the boy had catarrh, very, very bad.
I see. So they came down the river, and then how did they come around when they got to the Gulf? How did they
when they got down to the Gulf, they came down by New Orleans. Then out on the Gulf and around, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to Cedar Keys. You know, that's quite a big bay in there, Cedar Key, in very shallow water. It's a fishing town. And they sold the boat. They told them there that they could not go on around the Cape Florida, you know, because by that time a year had elapsed, practically. It was in the fall again.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it was hurricane season and they shouldn't go around there. So they sold this ferry bell in Cedar Keys, And when my boy was over there as preacher, he found an old nigger who remembered the ferry bell. She was sold as a model to build from.
Is that right? Was it a power boat or just a
There
sail?
was no power those days.
Just sail.
Nobody ever heard of power. The sail,
Mhm.
wind power.
Sure.
So they sailed her, and they came over across on the Mullet Special.
Now, what was that?
Well, Cedar Keys was a great place to catch mullet.
Mhm.
And they were shipped over to Jacksonville on the Mullet Special, and then shipped on north.
On the train called the Mullet Special?
Yeah.
I see. So you all got on the Mullet Special?
They got on the Mullet Special.
I mean, they got on the Mullet.
Yeah, they got on the Mullet Special. Came across, I think every place they stopped, my mother had to dispose of some of her household stuff. So by the time they got over to Jacksonville, she didn't have much left. Well, they stayed there for a while, rented a house on Bay Street, and there wasn't, at that time, Bay Street was a dirt street, wasn't a piece of pavement on it.
Mhm.
Then they came on down the
Well, that was right soon after the Civil War, of course.
Yes,
Mhm. So they came down to St. John's?
they came down to St. John's. What's the name of that place over there? Came down on the old Volusia. Steamer Volusia.
Sanford?
Yeah, they came down to Sanford. Then they came across by ox team from Sanford to Titusville. Bob Carlisle brought them over.
Uh-huh. Was this still 1871?
No, this was 1872 by that time.
I see.
I guess, pretty near it.
Uh-huh. So they came to Titusville by ox cart.
Yeah.
And then how did they come down from Titusville?
Well, they camped in Titusville for a while because they didn't have any boat, didn't know how to get down the river. They just waited for an opportunity to come along.
Uh-huh. Well, there wasn't any regular boat service.
Oh no, nothing on the river then.
No.
Just some very indifferent old boats. And they finally got down, they were headed for Ancona Heights.
Mhm.
Well, my uncle had a piece of land, or I think it was some sort of a claim on it, I don't know what it was. So they finally got down there, and the mosquitoes were there by the millions. Like mosquitoes, maybe you've never seen them that way. So then they decided, my father decided to build a shack down on the beach where the mosquitoes wouldn't be so bad. And while they were gone building that shack, the other place burned up and everything they had in it except a trunk that, they called it a box, I guess it was a trunk they had at Fort Pierce. And that's there with Jim Payne.
So they stayed on the beach a while.
So then my father didn't know what to do. Mama said, what do you do now? He said, I don't know. She says, the only time she ever heard him say he didn't know. So he then got a boat from an old nigger woman. She had a very bad old boat. And he thought he'd get on down river, get away from that place, maybe get down to Jupiter. He'd heard about it. So they started out, and the boat started to sink. And they saw a sailboat coming up the river. Is that working?
Mhm.
And when they got up to them, it was Captain Armour from Jupiter Lighthouse. He'd heard of Mr. Pierce, and he came up to get him. He wanted him for assistant keeper there. So they put him aboard Captain Armour's boat and left the old boat out in the river, sunk.
That was near Ancona, wasn't it?
Yes. And they came on down to Jupiter. My father was
He brought them all down to Jupiter
Yes.
on his boat.
Yes. And we were limited quarters at Jupiter. They had that, what they later used as the assistant's house. They all lived in that. The three families, the Captain Carlin and his wife and older boy. He was the first assistant keeper. Mr. Pierce, the second one. But they had a good time.
And James Armour was the first.
Fine man, fine
He
man.
was the head keeper.
Yes, he was the head keeper. I think he was the second keeper that Jupiter Lighted had.
Yeah.
Very fine man. Everybody liked him. So they kept some hens, and one day Mrs. Armour came in with a big egg. No, Mr. Armour brought the egg in, that was it. And Mrs. Armour said, "Oh, that's my hen laid that egg. I know that egg. That's my hen laid that egg." Well, to be sure, it was an alligator egg that Captain Armour had put in the hen's nest.
But did they try to eat it?
I never heard that part of it.
Well, were there any other people at Jupiter then besides the
No,
two
no.
families? They lived in one house.
Yeah. Later on, the keeper's house was built very good with a porch on three sides of it. Very nice house.
Well, your father stayed in Jupiter 1 year.
1 year, and there was so many glowing accounts of the Lake Worth country. The whole country down here was Lake Worth.
Yes.
So when he came on down, and they had some adventures coming down too, they came down inside. The hurricane came on while he was on his way down. He held the boat over them. They got underneath the boat, drew up on the land and turned it over and got under it. And he got that boat down over them during the hurricane. Well, I don't know how he did it.
And came on down Lake Worth.
And they came on down Lake Worth, and there's a couple living over by where the inlet is now. Morgan, I think the name was. And they got over there and got something to eat.
They lived on what is now the island of Palm Beach, I guess. The Morgans did.
No, they didn't. They lived up the inlet,
Well, I mean on the other side or on the
on
mainland?
the other side.
On the other side of the inlet.
Yeah.
Where Singer Island is now.
I don't think it was Singer Island.
Well, was it on
The
the
north side of the inlet, that was all.
north side of it? I see. Well, then they came on down to Hypoluxo, didn't they?
Yes, they came on down to Hypoluxo. And my father homesteaded there on Hypoluxo Island, and then my uncle on the north, the other half of it. We supposed we had half and half, you know.
When did your uncle come?
He was with them. When he came down from Jacksonville, he stayed up there and worked at his trade for a while.
I see.
And he came down. He was also a Jupiter's assistant keeper for a while.
And he came down at
But
the
he came
same
down in
time.
time to homestead along with the rest of them.
About the same year. About 1873.
About that, yes.
And did he have a family?
No.
He was a bachelor.
Well, actually, he was a fighter in the Civil War. When he was 16, along with my father.
Oh, he was your father's brother.
No, my mother's brother.
Your mother's brother.
Well, Moore.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Mr. Moore. He was Mr. Moore.
Yeah. I was known as Captain Moore.
Yes.
He always had a boat that he ran up and down the river.
I see.
And we lived over on Hypoluxo Island.
Well, the picture that we have is of Mr. Pierce's first house. That was
You know, I wish nobody had that picture.
well, it's a right nice picture.
Yes, but you know what one of those Palm Beach papers had in it? It had in it that it was a fan roof until one of these one of the men got Denver's got it and put a shingle roof on. Now that roof was put on there, shingle roof, when I was 4 years old.
On a shingle roof.
Shingle roof, we used to have ranging timbers about 15 inches square come on the Ocean Beach. And Will Leonard, who was a carpenter, went down to the beach and sawed off with a crosscut saw. Sawed off lates.
What were they from? Splinters from ships that had been damaged?
Or deck loads, you know, they washed overboard. Everything was sailed in those days.
Well, now you were the first white girl born on Lake Worth, weren't you?
Between Jupiter and Miami.
The first white girl born between Jupiter and Miami.
Yeah.
Well, now what white man was born
Well, my brother, Frank
before
Pierce,
you were?
Frank Pierce, and a boy by the name of Butler
They were born before you were.
on Hypoluxo Island.
Well, let me see. When you were 6 years old, you went down Biscayne Bay.
Yes, my father went down there as keeper.
What year were you born?
August 15th, 1876.
And then when you were 6, which was in 1882,
Yes.
you went down to Biscayne Bay.
Biscayne Bay, and we were down there a year and a half.
What did your father do down there?
Kept a House of Refuge, same as he did at Delray.
I see. Well, when he first came to Hypoluxo Island, what did he do to make his living, you might say?
Well, now that is a question. There wasn't any way to make a living.
Well, just he simply provided for himself and his family, didn't he?
Well, we had, somebody said you didn't have much to eat. I said we had plenty to eat. But we couldn't go out and go to the refrigerator and take it out and cook it right away. They had to go out and shoot it, or maybe catch it with a hook and line. We had plenty of fish and birds and venison. On the wheel shot 7 deer in 1 week. We strung that up on wire
Were they on the mainland or over on the island?
on the mainland.
Were there any deer on Hypoluxo Island?
Yes, once in a while there was. Used to go there and dig sweet potatoes.
Is that right? Were there any other animals over there on
Yeah,
Hypoluxo?
And the hotbed of wildcats.
It was?
See them most any old time. Wildcats, coons, possums. I remember Mother cooked baked a coon once. I don't think I tasted of it. And she only tried it that once. I guess it wasn't very good. Possum's good.
What did you eat mostly as far as meat was concerned?
Venison.
Did you?
We had 7 deer, as I said, strung up on wire under the porch and smoked and dried, salted, you know.
Oh, I see.
There isn't anything better than a piece of that dried jerky to chew on.
No. When you went to Delray to be the keeper there of the rescue.
House of Refuge.
House of Refuge, I mean. And how long did he stay there?
I don't know. I presume a year. About a year.
And then he went to Miami.
No, he came back to London and stayed there. You see, I was about a year old when I came back from Delray to the Hypoluxo Island. Then I was 6 years old when we went down in Captain Henderson's shop in Illinois down to Biscayne Bay. And we stayed down there for a year and a half. During that time, that's when I met E.T. Fields. He was working down there planting coconuts, Fields and Osborne. They bought up the whole East Coast.
Were there quite a few people living in that area then?
Where?
Down around Miami, Biscayne Bay.
Oh, there was a few people. Just a few.
About like there was up here.
Maybe a few more. But I got ahead of my story, really, because I don't know why. But anyhow, when I was 3 months old...
You were born in Delray Beach, weren't you?
I was born in the House of Refuge. It wasn't no Delray Beach.
Well, I mean where Delray is now.
Yes. And when that was in August. In October, my father brought my mother up to stay with the Brown family in Palm Beach while he went to Titusville after provisions. And just on the Dimmick family all arrived at that time. There was Frank Dimmick and Cap Dimmick and Grandfather Dimmick and Albert Gear. Each one of them married, they had family. And Mrs. Ella Potter, always called her Ella, was 8 years old at that time. That's where I got my birth certificate a few years ago. I wanted a birth certificate because everybody had them. So I wrote up to Claude Reese. I asked him. So he made out a birth certificate for me in which Mrs. Potter, Ella Potter, and Bill Venus both signed it, and stating that I was a tiny baby when they came.
Well, Miss Potter was Ella Dimmick, wasn't she?
Yes. Ella Potter was Ella Dimmick.
Well, the House of Refuge in Biscayne Bay was around Baker's Hall over?
No. It was, well, I suppose it's 5 or 6 miles from it.
North of it or south?
South. Didn't have anything to do with Baker's Hall over. I don't know why that was put in there. There was no inlet at Baker's Hall over. I think there is now.
Did you know the Brickles family?
Yes.
Who was in it, did you know?
Well, there was Mr. and Mrs. Brickle, Will, Charlie, George, Maud, Edith, and Bill.
There's about 5 or 6 children?
Yeah. Mrs. Brittle was an Australian woman.
How long?
Very nice woman.
How long had they been living down there, Ms. Voss?
I think they'd been there 2 or 3 years before we came to Florida. I'm not sure.
How long did you all stay down there? About a year and a half?
Yeah.
And you came back to Hypoluxo?
Came back to Hypoluxo, yes, and glad to get away from that place.
Went down in Miami?
You couldn't get any drinking water off the roof, rainwater. And they rebuilt the stations while we were there. Put on new cypress shingles. We had
the House of Refuge?
We had to drink that water, yes, put on new siding, new screen, new everything.
Oh. Well, they had just been built, hadn't they, recently?
They'd been built 7 years then.
They built about 1875.
Yeah.
Most all of them built about the same year.
Yes, they were built right down long.
Wasn't your father postmaster at Hypoluxo?
Yes, he was postmaster there for a good many years.
From 1885 to 1888?
1898.
1898. That was the year of his death.
Yeah.
Did you know James Hamilton?
Very well.
What sort of man was he? He was a young fellow, wasn't he?
Well, I suppose he's about 28, maybe 30. My brother thought he was 26, but I'm sure he was older than that. Heavy built, fair complexion fellow.
Where did he come from, do you know?
Yes, he came from Trigg County, Kentucky. Same place that Andrew Garnett and Jim Porter came from. They all came down here together. He was a very fine Christian man.
You say Mr. Garnett and Mr. Porter?
Jim Porter, Henry Porter's father.
They all came together?
Yes.
Were they bachelors?
Yes, all of them. It seems that Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Garnett made up to take this trip, and Mr. Porter heard of it and aged himself. I shouldn't say that. Anyhow, he came along with it.
He finagled himself into it.
That's right. That's right. That's what he did.
About what year did they come down? About 86?
No, 84. Wait a minute. I was 9 years old. How old? That's 85. 85.
Well, Mr. Hamilton was carrying the mail part of the time, wasn't he?
Much later on, I guess it was in 1887 that he was lost. I took him down to the beach. I wanted to use his skiff that week. He said I could use it if I take him down to the beach. So I did, and he never came back.
You took him to the beach to get started on his trip.
Yeah, down near the lower end.
As far as you know, when was the term the barefoot mailman first used? Mr. Pratt he wasn't the first one to use it, was he?
I don't know. We never spoke with that way.
Just spoke of him as the mailman.
Also see in some descriptions, they tell about how he carried a coffee pot and frying pan and everything in his haversack. He didn't.
Well, how did the poor fellow eat, Miss Voss?
At the Houses of Refuge, he'd go down here to the Delray one and stay there all night. The first night, that was just the afternoon trip down there. And then she'd put up a lunch for him, some sandwiches. And he'd eat breakfast there and start out, and the next night he would stay all night and eat supper and breakfast at the New River House of Refuge.
Down there Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah. No, not in Fort Lauderdale.
No, but I mean where it is now.
New River.
New River.
And the next night he ate supper over at Brickell's.
It didn't take him but 2 days to get from Delray Beach down to Miami then.
2 days and a half.
2 days and a half.
Then he started right back the next morning. After he stayed all night in Brickell's, he was right back.
Did he walk on the beach?
What's the only place there was to walk?
Well, that's what I thought. I just wanted to be sure.
They went barefoot too, and hung their shoes around the neck, so they had them to put on when they got there.
Did they wear one shoe? Or not any shoes at all?
What do you mean?
Well, if they wore one shoe, it would, the beach wasn't level, it would help walk level. That wasn't true, was it?
Nobody ever noticed the beach being like that. Walking enough to know. No, I had to walk barefoot before we walked with shoes on, and you didn't grip the sand, you slid. The foot slid.
Well, your brother was the one who went to the place where he disappeared, the first one.
My brother. No, I can't see that exactly, because when the Hamilton didn't come along, there was a man went down the beach, dead to ahead of Hamilton. This whole thing wouldn't have happened if the man had told the truth. But when he got to Charlie Coleman's that night at his New River, and Coleman said he was
I'm not in his shoes at all.
What do you mean?
Well, once the beach wasn't level, it would have walk level. That wasn't true, was it?
Nobody ever noticed the beach being like that. Walking enough to know. No, I had to walk barefoot because we walked with shoes on, and you didn't grip the sand, you slid. The foot slid.
Well, your brother was the one who went to the place where he disappeared, the first one.
My brother. No, I can't see that exactly, because when the Hamilton didn't come along, there was a man went down the beach, dead to ahead of Hamilton. This whole thing wouldn't have happened if the man had told the truth. But when he got to Charlie Coleman's that night at his New River, and Coleman said he was a keeper.
Coleman,
C-O-M-A-N.
Coleman.
College graduate down there, studying something, I don't know. And he said, how'd you get across the Hillsborough? Well, he said, there's some people come along with a team of horses and said they had a rubber boat and they set me across. If it hadn't been for that, but if Hamilton had been wise to the ways of the country, he would have stopped right there on the north bank and built a fire. Coleman would have seen the smoke and he would have gone up there. All this man had told the truth, but he didn't. So Hamilton stripped off his clothes and hung them in a tree, hung the nail bag in a tree, and attempted to swim across. Nobody knows what about him. Now, Andrew Garnett and Charlie Pierce, my brother, and Henry Burkhardt, who was one of the finest of the barefoot mailmen, each had a different opinion. Andrew Garnett said he knew the sharks because once he was crossing over their boat and the sharks were so thick, one of them grabbed his oar, bit his oar that he was paddling where they're going with. And Henry Burkhardt said he knew that there's barracudas. They're very voracious critters, you know. He said he'd seen them laying there in packs on the water. My brother said he knew it was alligators. So there you are, three of the best opinions that there was to be had. When my brother went down there hunting for Hamilton, he and the two Bradley boys went down. He left his gun in the boat if he'd only taken it out. But this huge alligator rose up right close alongside of it and followed it right along. And he went back to the boat to get his gun and the gator sunk Charlie intended to shoot that gator and cut him off. But he never got a chance.
Do you know how long the alligators were then, the long ones?
About 12 feet. And the whole south bank was just a mess of alligator tracks. You know, they look like a turkey track, only much larger. They come down, there seems to be sort of a game with them. There'd been a lot of fall rains and the river was running swiftly, you know. And they'd slide down with the cart and go outside, swim around, come across, come back in again.
When you say the river, which river do you mean?
Hillsborough.
The Hillsborough.
I think they would elect those penguins down in the Arctic region to slide down the hills, you know. I think they're regular game with them. But years afterwards, as much as 6 or 8 years afterwards, a man's jawbone was found with a gold-filled tooth in it. In a mangrove road in Hillsborough.
Was it near the inlet?
Down there, I think, Hamilton's.
Who were the first people in Lantana that you know of?
E.R. Bradley. They lived on Hypoluxo Island for quite a while. Then they went over took up a homestead over there. He was our first county school superintendent. I'm not sure whether he was or whether Hattie Gale's father was, but he was an old man and couldn't get around, and Mr. Bradley went the length and breadth of Dean County, which reached from Monroe County up to Jupiter.
How about Mr. Lyman?
I was 12 years old when they came in.
That was in 1888 then. So they were latecomers.
Rather, yes, but they made good. Fine family.
Was the House of Refuge in between Delray Beach and Miami Beach? There wasn't any House of Refuge in between what is now Delray and
What do you
Miami
think I was
Beach.
talking about when I was talking about New River?
Oh, yes, that's right. The New River there was. Well, was that inland, that is on the mainland, what we think of
On the
now?
Ocean Beach,
On the Ocean Beach.
on the Ocean Ridge. You see, Delray was number 3, and Fort Lauderdale or New River was number 4. Biscayne was number 5. Each one of them had a nice big boathouse, a flagstaff first, and then a boathouse. They each had 2 lifeboats with air tanks in them. Non-sinkable, you know. Metal lifeboats. But along the New Jersey coast, there was teams of horses that they could hitch to those things, and down here, it was almost impossible to even launch the small one. My father and mother managed to get the small one over once or twice. But you take it in a storm, you couldn't have launched that big one while the crew of the ship would have to come ashore to get the lifeboat to go out and save themselves.
So big and awful.
So big, yes. Everything stamped USLSS.
Well, now, where were House of Refuge number 2 and 1? You heard 3, 4, and 5.
There was a waveland.
Where was that?
You know where Stewart is?
Yes.
Well, there was 2 House of Refuge over there. Somewhere, I don't know. I'm never up there.
Well, there's one that's still there.
Yes.
And
That was the one the Browns went up to keep that. There was some more people from the lake here.
that was another Brown. Not Will Brown.
I don't think about Will Brown. This was David Brown.
David Brown.
Chicago people. He was a team merchant from Chicago.
Well, now, where did you go to school?
Well, I tell you what I did. I was a big know-it-all. Naturally, my father and mother thought I knew a great deal. I don't know why. I guess I was kind of a precocious kid. I always seemed to be around where other people weren't taking in what they were talking about. And I decided I got a catalog from a normal school up in White Spring. And it was a beautiful catalog, so I decided I wanted to go to White Spring to school. I thought I knew enough. And when I got up there, I found I didn't. So I stayed about 2 weeks. My mother stayed with me.
That was up in Real Lake City?
Yes. Yes, there's a pretty nice little summer resort there. Nice big spring and everything, you know, good water to drink.
What grade did you start in up there?
Don't tell me anything about the grades. It's a normal school.
Oh, normal school.
Yes.
Well, how old were you then when you started?
I was 16. So I came home. That was the extent of my schooling.
How long
I
did
went
you
to
stay?
school to Bradley's for maybe 3 or 4 days. They started a school down there, and they had Amy Mann, her school teacher.
Where was that, did you say, down there?
Well, you know where the boatyard is in Lantana? Right about in there.
You only went there 3 or 4 days?
This Amy Mann, her father ran a paper in Daytona. I don't know the name of the paper. But she was a school teacher.
What grade were you in then?
I don't know anything about any grades.
Just went to school?
Just never heard anything about any grades. Anyhow, in speaking of a group of letters in the spelling book, she called them a clump of letters. I said, went home, I said, I'm not going to her. She don't know enough. I didn't realize that she knew a lot more than I did. And in the meantime, my good big sail, I had a dandy little sailboat belonging to my brother. And I knew very well how to sail it, but the sail had gone to pieces. And the new one they allowed me didn't amount to much. Wasn't hardly enough to sail with, couldn't hardly keep steerage on her. And I wasn't going to roll over there every day. My folks didn't make me go back. So I didn't go. Well, the rest of my education has been what I could pick up.
How long did you stay in White Springs?
I think I told you 2 weeks.
2 weeks only.
Well, you were telling about Guy Bradley And
Yes, he and his brother-in-law, Will Burton, had cleaned his revolver and loaded it the night before. And Will Burton told me that there wasn't a shot going out of it. But the guy went over to Smith's schooner, and according to Smith, he said...
well, now, Smith was a neighbor up here, wasn't he?
Yes, his neighbor up here, his neighbor down there.
And he became a...
They had taken care of Mrs. Smith when she'd been ill when one or two of her babies were born. They were very good friends.
He became an egret hunter.
Yes.
And Guy Bradley was living in Flamingo at this time and was working for the Audubon Society.
Yes. So he went out and he said, Smith, I've come after you, boy, Tom. And Smith said, and he showed the place in the mast where he said Guy fired. He didn't do it. Guy was shot in the back, by the way. So, in the meantime, during that day, after he killed Guy, he went back home and loaded his wife and children out of his schooner and went over to Key West and gave himself out.